So moving on from what we do in the lab and the techniques we use in the lab, cancer drug development. So how we develop cancer drugs and how this has evolved over time from the early 50s up till now. So firstly, the most common, and I'm sure you've heard of this, is chemotherapy. So chemotherapy is a systemic therapy. Systemic being you inject it in the blood and it kind of circulates your whole body. And they will effectively kill anything in their way, like anything. So they will kill not just the cancer cells, which here are in red, but also the normal cells. So this is why you have these severe side effects, because chemotherapy is not specific. They will kill anything in their way. And so this is why you get, in patients, you have hair loss and things like that, like really low blood count. They will kill that. They will kill your hair follicles and things like that. So this is chemotherapy historically, and it's still very, very much used today, chemotherapy, but more and more research. So we moved on as well from chemotherapy. Now we have what we call targeted therapy and immunotherapy. So firstly, targeted therapy, hopefully it's obvious in the name, it will only target the cancer cells, but not the healthy cells. So these targets the proteins required for cancer cell growth, survival, and metastasis. So, and it leaves the healthy normal cells untouched. So examples of this, hopefully, if you've heard of these drugs, erlotinib, which is used in lung cancer, Herceptin, which is used in breast cancer, Avastin, which is used in many, many types of cancer, breast, lung, colorectal, and things like that. And then this is a kind of new kid on the block, immunotherapy. I think you may have heard this buzzword around. So immunotherapy does not kill or like touch any of the tumor cells or the normal cells. What they do is they affect the immune cells. Yung immune cells natin, as you know, pag may sakit tayo, they will fight the infection and things like that. So the immune cells are also capable of fighting and killing the tumor cells, but we need to help them. And so we need to have drugs that activate the immune system to essentially kill the tumor cells. And so the downside of this is very expensive, and it has a different set of side effects as well, very different from a chemo, very different side effects from a targeted therapy. So yeah, it's kind of a unique set of side effects as well. And most common in use now is what we call pembrolizumab and nivolumab. So these are the most, I'd say, what we call the blockbuster immunotherapy in the clinic today. And so this is now the modern era of cancer drug development. We're still using chemotherapy, but we're moving away from that because of the side effects. And now we're moving towards targeted therapy and immunotherapy. And so just to give you an example of targeted therapy, I think this is a good segue onto drug development. I'll talk about Herceptin. So this is a drug for HER2 positive breast cancer. So Herceptin, oh my God, mali spelling ko. Herceptin is a monoclonal, it's an antibody that targets the HER2 receptor. So if you remember yung diagram kanina, that's the nucleus and yung mga antenna dito, these are the receptors. So this can easily be a HER2 receptors in a breast cancer cell. So HER2 was discovered way back then, before I was even born. 1984, this was discovered by Bob Weinberg, the guy who wrote that paper, Hallmarks of Cancer. So he's pretty big. I think he's still alive. So he discovered that. And then in 1986, Slamon and Ulrich, so again, two scientists in California, I remember, so pursued the hypothesis that HER2 plays a role in breast cancer. And so they found out that, this HER2 sits on the surface of breast cancer cells. So these are receptors. And then in normal breast cancer cells, they've realized that, there's 20,000 HER2 receptors, but in a breast cancer cell, there are up to 2 million HER2 receptors that sits on the surface. So again, this is what, overexpression of the receptor. And up to 20% of breast cancer are HER2 positive. So they have this overexpression of the HER2 receptor. And then they thought, okay, we need to discover, you need to treat this patient and develop a drug for her too. So they approached a pharma company called Genentech back in the day in San Francisco in California, which is now part of Roche, to support their promising experiment. But as in, wala lang, tinalikuran lang sila. Support was not forthcoming. But then after a few years, the mother of a senior, the mother of the VP in Genentech was diagnosed with breast cancer. And so this kind of spurred the research and the excitement to actually explore, developing a drug for her too. And so that's when it started in the early 90s. The trials for Herceptin, the phase 1, the phase 2 trials were conducted. Then the phase 3 in the late 90s, and eventually in the early 2000s, Herceptin was approved for metastatic breast cancer. And then 5 years later, it was approved for early breast cancer, so non-metastatic breast cancer. So this is Herceptin. This is the receptor. Medyo complicated version ng aking antenna dito. And this is the antibody. This is Herceptin. It binds to the outside of the receptor and blocks the signaling pasok sa cell. So again, it just shows you that you don't just discover a drug and then you take it to the clinic the next day. It takes years and years and years of development from its discovery to knowing anong ginagawa niya sa breast cancer, developing the antibody, clinical trials. It took 2 decades for her to from discovery until like Herceptin was available as a treatment for breast cancer patients.